The flight from Kabul to Maryland felt longer than the entire war. 18 months of sandstorms, coded briefings, and sleeping with one eye open had ended. As the cab pulled into our quiet suburban street, I pressed my palm to the window, picturing Aria's giggle, Jasper's small arms wrapping around me, Victor's smile waiting at the door. I played this reunion in my head 1,000 times. Home was supposed to heal what war had broken. But when I opened the front door, silence hit me like a flashbang. No laughter. No mom. Echoing through the hall. Just the faint clicking of game controllers and the mechanical chime of a microwave. Aria and Jasper sat cross-legged on the couch, faces lit by their tablets. They didn't even look up. My boots froze mid-step. I whispered their names, soft, trembling, but only the game music answered. Then came footsteps from upstairs. Margaret and Harold descended first, all smiles too tight to be real. "Shadow," Margaret exclaimed, her voice sugary but sharp around the edges. "You're finally back." Her hug lingered just long enough to feel staged. Harold patted my shoulder like a colleague, not a father-in-law. Victor appeared last. My husband. The man who had promised to keep the home fires burning. His embrace was limp, cautious, as if I were made of glass or gilt. The smell of a stranger's cologne lingered on his shirt. My stomach turned. Then I saw them. Cardboard boxes stacked by the staircase, suitcases half-zipped, my name scribbled on a few in black marker. "Are you moving?" I asked, my voice cracking. Margaret exchanged a glance with Victor before speaking, her tone suddenly cold. "Shadow, while you abandoned us," Victor struggled. "We moved in to help." The word abandoned landed harder than any bullet I'd dodged overseas. My breath caught. The house I'd fought to return to didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stage, and everyone else already knew their lines but me. In that instant I realized. The war I'd survived out there was nothing compared to the one waiting inside my own home. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The first dinner back home was supposed to be a celebration. I'd brought small wooden camels from Kabul for Aria and Jasper, wrapped carefully in newspaper from the base. Margaret had prepared roast chicken and mashed potatoes, the kind of comfort food I used to crave during missions. The table looked perfect, but the silence between us was deafening. Every scrape of a fork on porcelain echoed through the room. Jasper sat to my right, Aria across from me, both unusually still. I tried to fill the space with gentle conversation, asking about school, their friends, anything that could remind them I was still their mom. Jasper barely whispered answers, eyes darting toward Victor as if waiting for permission to speak. Aria just stared at her plate, her lips pressed in a line that looked too old for a 7-year-old. Then it happened. Jasper's small hand slipped, and the porcelain plate shattered against the hardwood floor. The sound, sharp, sudden, snapped something inside me. My pulse spiked, my vision narrowed. Before I even realized it, I was under the table, hands over my head, counting down from 5 like I used to when mortars hit the compound. 5, 4, 3. When I opened my eyes, there was no dust, no screaming soldiers, only my family frozen in place. Jasper's eyes filled with tears, Aria whimpered. Victor's fork clattered as he pushed back his chair. And then I saw it. Margaret's phone raised, her face calm, almost satisfied, as she recorded me crouched beneath the table. "Shadow," Victor said, voice strained. "You're scaring the kids." I tried to speak, to explain that it was a reflex, that the sound had triggered something, but the words came out jagged and small. I reached for Jasper, but he flinched. That hurt more than any battlefield wound I'd ever taken. Margaret ended the recording with a little sigh, then stood up, wiping invisible crumbs from her hands. "This isn't healthy, dear," she said coolly. "Maybe you need professional help. For everyone's sake." That night I couldn't sleep. The air in the house felt foreign. From the guest room where they'd temporarily moved me, I could hear Margaret whispering through the thin walls, soft, deliberate words planting seeds in my children's ears. Words like unsafe and unstable. I pressed a pillow over my face, willing the voices away. In the days that followed, the distance between me and my family widened into a canyon. Aria began locking her door at night. Jasper refused to be alone with me. Victor avoided eye contact altogether. When I tried to initiate family breakfast, Margaret interrupted, suggesting I rest instead. She'd taken over every task: school drop-offs, bedtime stories, grocery lists, while I became a silent shadow in my own home. Each time I tried to reconnect, I could feel the wall between us growing thicker, built brick by brick from fear and manipulation. I'd catch glimpses of my children whispering to Margaret, eyes darting toward me with hesitation, almost guilt. The woman who had once called me mommy now treated me like a stranger. Victor wasn't cruel, just absent. His love had turned into a quiet avoidance, the kind that hurts more than shouting. Sometimes he'd stay late at work, sometimes he'd come home and pretend to sleep on the couch. When I asked if we could talk, he'd mumble, "Not now, Shadow. The kids need stability." I watched my life slip through my fingers like sand. My presence had been replaced by a story they created. A version of me that existed only in their whispered warnings and edited memories. They replaced my presence with a narrative they built. I wrote in my journal one night, the ink smudged from my tears. I had survived ambushes, betrayals, and desert nights colder than death. But nothing compared to this quiet dismantling, to watching my own family forget who I was while I still stood in front of them. By the end of that week, I no longer felt like a mother, a wife, or even a person. I was just the problem, the ghost haunting a house that used to be mine. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of ordinary day that blindsides you before it breaks your life apart. I was folding laundry in the living room when the doorbell rang. Aria and Jasper were at school, Victor had a client meeting, and Margaret was somewhere upstairs. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. Two people stood on the porch. A woman with a clipboard and a man wearing a navy jacket that read Child Protective Services. "Mrs. Reed?" the woman asked. Her tone was polite, but her eyes already held judgment. "We received a report concerning your children's safety." For a second, I thought it was some kind of mistake. "My children? There must be." She cut me off gently but firmly. "We have video evidence, ma'am. May we come in?" Before I could respond, Victor appeared behind me. His sudden presence made my chest tighten. He didn't even ask what was happening. He already knew. "Yes, of course," he said smoothly, ushering them in. "We've been so worried. Shadow's episodes have been escalating." The words hit like bullets. Episodes. My husband had turned my trauma into ammunition. The agents played several short clips on an iPad, shaky phone videos of me flinching, ducking, trembling. Margaret's voice narrated in the background, carefully rehearsed, describing me as unpredictable and potentially violent. I recognized the dinner footage immediately. The night Jasper dropped the plate. But the video had been edited. The sound slowed, my trembling magnified. Margaret's narration layering fear over every second. Then came other clips I didn't even know existed. Me crying alone in the backyard, pacing at night, whispering my kids' names through their locked door. Each image felt like a knife twisting deeper. When the agents finally looked up, their faces were carved with concern. "Ma'am, for the safety of your children, we're recommending temporary separation," the woman said softly. "We'll need you to gather your belongings." I turned to Victor, searching his face for any sign of support, but his eyes were cold, glassy, distant. "It's for the best, Shadow," he said. "You need help. The kids can't handle this anymore." My hands went numb. My world, the home I'd fought to return to, collapsed in slow motion. I begged, "Please just let me explain," but he didn't even flinch. By nightfall, I was standing in the driveway with a single trash bag of clothes. Margaret watched from the porch, phone in hand like a queen overseeing an execution. The porch light flickered behind her, throwing her smile into shadow. When I checked my bank account later that night, the final blade fell. Balance: $40.16. Every cent of my combat pay, my savings, my pension gone. I stared at the screen in disbelief, scrolling through transactions I didn't recognize. Transfers labeled Holt Performance Gym. That name sparked something faintly familiar. Derek Holt, Victor's cousin, a man who'd once asked me at a family barbecue if I'd ever seen real blood. Now he was apparently the owner of my entire future. That night, I parked my old pickup behind a closed gas station. The air was cold metallic. I wrapped my jacket tighter, trying to convince myself this was temporary. The streetlights flickered through the cracked windshield, painting the cab in broken amber light. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, hollow eyes, chapped lips, and a woman I barely recognized. I had spent years navigating war zones, but this quiet exile felt more dangerous. There were no explosions, no enemies in uniform, just betrayal wrapped in politeness and paperwork. Sleep came in short bursts. Every creak of the truck made me flinch. Each night I whispered to myself, you survived worse. But in truth, I wasn't sure anymore. On the third night, someone knocked on my window. I jolted awake, heart hammering. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and a familiar voice said, "Damn Shadow, you look like hell." It was Lena Carter, my old squad mate from Afghanistan, now a defense lawyer in D.C. We hadn't spoken in months. She'd found me through a mutual contact who saw my situation on social media, courtesy of Margaret's concerned family post. Lena slid into the passenger seat, her expression hardening as I told her everything. The videos, the CPS visit, the missing money. She didn't interrupt once, just listened, her soldier's discipline still sharp. When I finished, she said quietly, "They set you up." Those words sent a cold current through my spine. Over the next few days, Lena worked like she was back in the field, relentless, methodical. She dug into Victor's accounts and found wire transfers to Holt Performance Gym. The amounts matched my combat pay deposits almost exactly. "Victor's using Derek's business as a laundering front," she said. Classic amateur fraud. But it didn't stop there. Lena pulled up my iCloud backup, retrieved through a legal request. Hidden in the deleted folders were short clips, the originals of the videos Margaret had edited. In them I wasn't violent. I was scared, triggered, but calm. You could even hear Margaret coaching Jasper to stay away from mommy when she acts weird. Lena's face darkened. This isn't about protecting the kids. This is a full-blown character assassination. Then came the real bombshell. Lena discovered a forged document filed by Margaret, a death certificate dated 6 months earlier. My signature was crudely copied. With that document, she had claimed a $500,000 life insurance payout under my name. I felt sick, the room spinning as Lena laid the papers on the table between us. "They declared you dead," Lena said softly, "while you were still bleeding for this country." The final straw came a few days later when Lena tracked down Derek. He owned a local gym, more of a cover operation than a business. We drove there, parked across the street, and watched him through the glass window. He was laughing with Victor, slapping him on the back. And then I saw it, my dog tags hanging around Derek's neck. The same ones I'd worn on every mission, the same ones I'd entrusted to Victor when I left for my last deployment. Seeing them there on him was a slap in the face. A mockery. I couldn't breathe. "He's wearing my name," I whispered. Lena clenched the steering wheel. "Then we make them choke on it." That was the moment something inside me shifted. The numbness melted into rage. Not the chaotic kind from PTSD, but a clear, focused fury. They had stolen my family, my money, even my identity. But they underestimated one thing. I was trained to see patterns, to follow trails, to fight quietly until the target was exposed. For weeks, Lena and I gathered evidence. Forged signatures, bank statements, messages Victor had deleted but left on his synced laptop. We recorded a heated phone call where he accidentally admitted to everything. The fake insurance claim, the doctored videos, even using CPS as leverage. Hearing his voice tremble when he realized the call was being recorded gave me a satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. That night, as I drove back to the cheap motel we were using as base, the streetlights once again flickered across my windshield. But this time, the reflection staring back at me in the mirror wasn't broken. It was steady, focused. They had tried to bury me with lies, but they forgot that soldiers are trained to dig their way out. The war had changed. The battlefield was now legal documents and courtrooms instead of deserts and gunfire. But the mission remained the same. Survive, adapt, and reclaim what was mine. The world had already taken almost everything from Shadow Reed. Her honor, her family, her peace. But one thing still burned beneath the wreckage: discipline. The kind the military had carved into her bones. And that discipline became her armor. For weeks, she and Lena Carter, the woman who once shared a foxhole with her in Helmand, built a case like soldiers preparing for war. Their weapons now weren't rifles or codes but evidence, logic, and patience. Every night, they sat in Lena's dimly lit apartment, documents scattered like tactical maps across the coffee table. Bank statements, call logs, insurance forms. Lena's voice was calm, methodical. They underestimated you, Shadow. They thought you'd break. They're not wrong, Shadow muttered. I did break. But I'm still moving. It started with a recording, one that would later make the courtroom freeze. Lena handed her a small device. Victor called me last week, pretending to discuss settlement terms. I patched it through a recorder. They listened. The man who once held Shadow's hand during air raids now spoke in a tone colder than sand after sunset. She's unstable. This is the only way to keep the kids safe and the money in the right hands. She'll eventually disappear. The words cracked something deep in Shadow, but behind the crack was steel. That's enough, she whispered. He just wrote his own confession. Next came the bank trail. Lena subpoenaed records through her firm, cross-referencing Victor's transactions with those of Derek Holt. The timestamps aligned perfectly. Every combat pay deposit from Shadow's military account had been quietly rerouted into Derek's gym business. Clean on paper, dirty in intent. Then, a turn of fate arrived uninvited. Derek was arrested one night for domestic assault. It made the local paper, small headline, page 6. But to Shadow and Lena it was gold. The arrest granted them legal access to Derek's digital correspondence during the ongoing investigation. Inside, they found screenshots and voice memos bragging about the insurance job. Derek even mocked her, showing off the dog tags he'd been wearing, the ones she thought were lost in Afghanistan. Shadow stared at the photo, her breath shaking. He wore my name like a trophy, she said. Lena leaned forward, eyes hard. Then we take it back. The courtroom was sterile and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every cough sound like thunder. Margaret sat in the front row, pearls around her neck, face frozen in practiced grief. Victor wore a tailored suit, the color of control. His eyes darted toward Shadow but never met hers fully. The children weren't present, too fragile, according to the family's lawyer. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, began. Ms. Reed, your petition for custody rests heavily on the validity of these claims. We'll proceed with evidence review. Lena rose, her posture crisp as ever. Your Honor, we'll begin with Exhibit A, a recorded conversation between Mr. Victor Reed and myself regarding his intentions toward my client. Victor shifted. Margaret's fingers clenched her purse. As the recording played, silence thickened. She's unstable. This is the only way to keep the money in the right hands. Victor's jaw tightened. Margaret tried to stand. The judge motioned her down. The courtroom had turned into a vacuum, pulling in every ounce of deceit they'd spun. Then came the financial trail, Exhibit B. Lena presented documents, line by line, transaction by transaction. Each transfer date mirrored Victor's withdrawals. Each destination led to Derek's account. Victor's lawyer attempted a weak defense. Those were family investments. Lena countered sharply. Into a gym that doesn't exist anymore? Convenient. Finally, Exhibit C, Derek's digital files. The projected image of him smirking with Shadow's dog tags around his neck appeared on the screen. Gasps rippled across the room. Shadow's heart pounded. Not from pain this time, but from release. When Lena played the last voice memo, Derek's voice slurred. Victor and the old lady think they're untouchable. We faked her death, got the payout, and now we've got the kids too. Easy money. Margaret shouted. That's taken out of context. The judge slammed her gavel. Enough. In that moment, the courtroom no longer belonged to them. It belonged to truth. Hours later, the verdict came down. The judge spoke slowly, each word like a drumbeat. Given the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and false testimony, the court grants Ms. Shadow Reed full custody of her children. Additionally, an investigation will be opened into Mr. Reed and Mr. Holt's financial conduct. Shadow didn't cry. She just exhaled, long, trembling, silent. Lena squeezed her hand. You did it. No, Shadow said softly, staring ahead. We did it. And this is just the beginning. Outside, the Maryland air felt cleaner than she remembered. The sky was overcast, but light still cut through, the kind of light that didn't blind but guided. Behind her, Victor was being escorted out, his voice cracking with something that sounded like regret or fear. Margaret turned away, finally stripped of her poise. For the first time in 18 months, Shadow felt something unfamiliar on her skin. Not war, not paranoia, but freedom. She looked at the courthouse steps, at the flag waving weakly in the distance. "They tried to bury me," she whispered. "But I was trained to survive under rubble." And as she walked down those steps, her reflection caught in the glass doors. Not the broken soldier, not the outcast mother, but a woman reborn through truth, carrying her name back into the world she once defended. The courtroom doors swung open, releasing a flood of light that felt almost alien after weeks of tense, recycled fluorescent air. Shadow Reed stepped out, holding the thin file of evidence that had become both her weapon and her shield. Her heart thudded with exhaustion, anticipation, and something else she hadn't felt in months: hope. Aria was waiting at the front steps, bundled in a scarf too big for her small shoulders, her dark eyes wide and uncertain. Shadow knelt slowly, arms trembling as she reached out. "Aria, it's me," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. The little girl stiffened immediately, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. Her body didn't respond to the hug, didn't melt against her mother's chest. For a moment, Shadow held her anyway, letting her small frame tremble against her own. She could feel the invisible wall built by months of fear and manipulation. It pressed against her chest like an unrelenting weight. Jasper, standing a step behind Aria, clutched his backpack straps tightly. And then he spoke, his voice shaky, fragile. "Mom. I." He paused, swallowed, and then muttered the words that cut sharper than any knife. "Derek, Daddy?" The words hit Shadow like a sniper round. Derek Holt, the man who had stolen her dog tags, who had become a grotesque placeholder in the life she had fought for, had infiltrated her children's perception of family. Aria's eyes darted toward her brother. She was confused, scared, her trust fractured. Shadow swallowed the lump in her throat. She stood there, frozen, hugging Aria loosely, feeling the hollow echo of victory reverberate through her chest. "I won the war but lost the home I fought for," she thought, letting the words settle like dust in the empty spaces between her ribs. The courtroom had delivered legal triumph, but the battlefield of the heart was still littered with unexploded grief, betrayal, and fear. Victor and Margaret were behind her now, escorted by attorneys. They avoided the children's gaze, and Victor's lips moved silently, mouthing apologies that sounded hollow even if sincere. Shadow's hands tightened around Aria's small ones. Legal justice had been served, but the emotional debt remained unpaid. The drive to the apartment Lena had secured for her was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the courtroom. The small unit smelled faintly of fresh paint and pine cleaner, minimalist but livable. A single window allowed soft daylight to filter in, casting muted shadows across the bare wooden floor. The ticking of a wall clock punctuated the silence like a heartbeat, steady, constant, reassuring. Shadow unpacked slowly, each item a small reclaiming of her autonomy. She placed her worn journals on a shelf, arranged her few remaining clothes in neat piles, and finally her dog tags. They sat on the center of the table, catching the light like tiny symbols of battles won, losses mourned, and identity reclaimed. Lena hovered nearby, unpacking files and supplies for her own makeshift home office. "You okay?" she asked quietly, not wanting to intrude but knowing silence could also be a trap. Shadow nodded, though her eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath. "I think I'm finally out of the crossfire," she said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't let it break her. She looked out the window at the quiet street, letting the afternoon sun warm her face. "But that doesn't mean the war is over." That night, she set up a small makeshift bedtime routine with Aria and Jasper. They ate cold cereal at the tiny table, the sounds of spoon against bowl oddly comforting. Shadow tried to make conversation, to ask gentle questions about their days, their thoughts. Aria answered in clipped, guarded phrases. Jasper avoided her gaze. But for the first time in months she felt them near her. They were tentative, fragile, but present. Later, after the children were asleep in the spare bedroom, Shadow sat alone at the table. The dog tags lay in front of her like small metallic anchors. She picked them up and felt the engraved letters press against her fingers. Memories of distant deserts, of firefights and midnight patrols, flashed across her mind. Those same tags had been a symbol of service and sacrifice, and now they were also a symbol of survival, resilience, and reclamation. She whispered to the empty apartment, to the shadows on the wall, to the ticking clock. Healing them will take years. Healing myself starts now. There was no dramatic resolution in that moment. No magical undoing of all the pain, lies, and manipulation. There was only a cautious, deliberate step forward. A decision to reclaim herself before trying to reclaim her children. To rebuild not just a house but a home brick by brick, heart by heart. Shadow placed the dog tags carefully in a small wooden box. She allowed herself to breathe, to feel, to acknowledge the enormity of what she had endured. Lena's presence beside her was quiet solidarity, a reminder that she wasn't alone. The legal victory had secured custody, but the real work had just begun. Repairing trust, untangling fear from love, and reminding Aria and Jasper of the mother who had survived war for them, and now for herself. The apartment was still bare, the walls echoing slightly with the soft tick of the clock. Shadow poured herself a cup of tea, holding it with both hands, savoring the warmth. Outside, Maryland's streetlights began to glow as evening settled in, painting long shadows that reached across the room. She watched them move like gentle reminders. Light persists even in the darkness. She knew the road ahead was long. Aria's flinches, Jasper's misnaming, the months of indoctrination, the psychological scars left by betrayal. These weren't things a courtroom could fix. But the first step, the hardest step, had been taken. In that quiet moment, Shadow Reed realized something profound. Victory wasn't about the courtroom or the money or even regaining custody. It was about reclaiming agency, reclaiming self, and preparing to fight the most important battle yet. The one for her family's hearts and her own peace. She leaned back, letting the clock tick in measured rhythm, the dog tags gleaming softly in the dim light. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel a faint, fragile sense of hope. The war within her home was far from over, but now she held the map. Now she had a path forward. Shadow Reed's story is not just a tale of betrayal and legal victory. It's a journey through the most intimate battles of the human heart, where trust is weaponized, love is manipulated, and the line between safety and danger blurs in the most familiar spaces. After months of deception, emotional manipulation, and the fight to reclaim her life, Shadow found herself reflecting on the lessons etched into her survival. These lessons aren't just hers. They're universal truths for anyone navigating life's unexpected betrayals and emotional warfare. 1. Silence can be violence. One of the hardest truths Shadow faced was realizing that betrayal often comes not just from those who act, but from those who stay silent while you suffer. Friends, family, even institutions, their inaction can amplify harm, creating a web where lies and manipulation thrive. Shadow learned that when people around you ignore your pain, or pretend it doesn't exist, they are part of the assault on your life. Awareness of silence is the first step to recognizing real threats and protecting yourself. 2. Trust without awareness is surrender. Trust is essential for any relationship, but Shadow's story is a stark reminder that blind trust, especially with those closest to you, can be dangerous. She had assumed that Victor and Margaret would protect her children and her home while she served overseas. Instead, they weaponized that trust. Shadow's experience teaches that healthy trust must be paired with vigilance. Giving someone full control, financially, emotionally, or legally, without oversight can leave you exposed to the deepest kind of betrayal. 3. Healing isn't revenge. While the courtroom victory restored custody and uncovered financial fraud, Shadow realized that legal wins alone could not heal the wounds inflicted by betrayal. Revenge might feel satisfying, but it does not restore peace or rebuild broken relationships. True healing requires turning inward, confronting trauma, and learning to forgive yourself for the things you could not control. Justice restores rights. Healing restores the soul. 4. The truth takes time, but it always arrives. The conspiracy against Shadow was elaborate, woven over months, even years. At times it felt impossible to untangle. Yet, through patience, persistence, and courage, the truth emerged. Shadow learned that while lies can travel fast and wide, the truth, however delayed, eventually surfaces. Patience, resilience, and unwavering commitment to uncovering facts are the keys to reclaiming one's life from deception. 5. You are your own rescue mission. Perhaps the most profound lesson Shadow internalized was that no one will come to save you if you remain passive. She survived war zones alone. She survived emotional exile alone. She had to summon her own strength, gather allies like Lena, and step into the fight herself. Shadow's story reminds us all. Empowerment comes from taking responsibility for your own rescue, for rebuilding your life, and for refusing to remain a passive victim. Through these lessons, Shadow transformed her pain into purpose, her betrayal into wisdom, and her fight into a roadmap for resilience. For anyone watching this story, the message is clear. Life may shatter you, but with awareness, patience, and courage, you can reclaim yourself, rebuild your foundation, and navigate the world with both strength and compassion. The battles we survive shape us, but the healing we pursue defines us. These are the truths Shadow discovered. Lessons meant to inspire, guide, and remind viewers that even in the darkest betrayals, the path to reclaiming your life and self-respect is always possible. If Shadow Reed's journey resonated with you, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories exploring resilience, justice, and the power of self-worth. Your voice matters. Share in the comments below. What moment in your life shattered you, and how did you find the strength to rebuild? Let's inspire each other through our struggles and triumphs.